Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coach Replay Show. We are wrapping up season 4 here this month, talking about reflections and new learning. And my good friend and colleague, Dr. Sibme Affinito, is joining us today. She had posted something, gosh, Stephanie, I think it was like in February or March, when I was deep in the eye roll of ChatGPT. That was my primary reaction, was just like, oh, here we go again. But you posted something about ChatGPT and coaching, and it really intrigued me. So I'm so excited that you were able to come on before the season wrapped up and talk with us a little bit about ChatGPT as a resource or a tool for our coaching. So I know you're no stranger to the Coach Replay Show, but before we jump into our topic today, will you just introduce yourself for those who may not know you yet?
Sure, I'm happy to. Happy to be back. I'm Stephanie Affinito. I am a literacy teacher educator here in upstate New York at the University at Albany, and I work with teachers who want to become literacy specialists and literacy coaches. And I'm also a virtual coach for Sibme, which means I get to spend lots of time on Zoom and with all of these great tech tools supporting teachers from afar.
Yeah. And, Stephanie, you're always my go-to when I am working with a teacher who's looking at a particular technology, or I'm thinking about what are some other, I feel like I'm in a tech rut. What are some other tools out there that I haven't had a chance to? I don't know how you do it. You stay on top of all of these great new tools, but you really did kind of slow my eye roll just a little bit with ChatGPT with your post. So y'all, if you don't already follow Stephanie on in her blog and on social media, be sure to download the notes and takeaways for today's episode so you can get a quick link right to her and follow her, because she's got great content, especially if you're a literacy person. But even if you're not, y'all, even if you're just a teacher or a leader, Stephanie, you've got so many great resources. So thank you for constantly creating and putting those things out there. So.
Oh, I love it. And I love your description of where you are in the eye rolling process of ChatGPT, because it wasn't too long ago that I was actually in that same eye roll state of mind, even though I typically embrace new tech tools. I want to be the first one in to experiment with them. I mean, I wrote a book about literacy coaching and technology. So I found myself wondering, why aren't you just jumping into this as a coaching tool? So I'm glad to be a little bit further ahead of you in your stage, and hopefully can share with others who might have been hesitant to get started as well.
Yeah, I think maybe it's because of our literacy background, maybe a little bit with that, as we think about, one's own voice and their own thoughts and like plagiarism. Like it feels a little plagiarism-y to me when I think about ChatGPT. And of course, that's been the big thing in the news when it comes to ChatGPT's impact on education. And so I think that's just where I kind of was, like, just kind of turned my nose a little bit to it, rolled my eyes a lot. So without further ado, I love hearing, though, that you also were in that stage, because it also makes me feel a little bit like a fuddy-duddy in the fact that I've been like, oh, I think I'm too old for ChatGPT. So I'm glad I'm not the only one who just had that initial response. So what changed for you? Talk to me a little bit about how you kind of moved across that threshold into ChatGPT, and then we'll talk about some of the meaningful ways you've discovered to use it in coaching.
Okay. Well, to be completely honest with you, the number one deciding factor in how I stopped my eye roll and started to embrace ChatGPT was my 18-year-old son. We were having lots of conversations on the use of ChatGPT in education. He is a college student who was ready to embrace all aspects of what ChatGPT could offer. Mm-hmm. We had many a conversation around the kitchen table of him touting how wonderful it could be, and me kind of putting the brakes on it because of all of those negative implications that I think teachers were worried about. Are they really going to write their essays? Is it their own work? Where do we cross the line into plagiarism? How do we check? I was so focused on that aspect instead of embracing the possibilities of what it could do for teachers, for students, for educators, for college professors, coaches, all of us. And we were having this back and forth conversation. And he said, you use everything else. You use things that aren't technology, like you've got chart paper everywhere, you've got sticky notes everywhere. He goes, but you use Google, you use Padlet, you ask Siri questions. Why not this? And the kicker for me that really put me over the edge was his reminder that I've been trying to stay a little bit more off of my computer. Like many of us, I am at the computer for hours a day. And it's wreaking havoc, with the hands and the wrists and the muscles. And I've been trying to think of ways to lessen the load. And he said, that can be a way that you can just get stuff done faster or be a little bit more productive so that you can do the other things that you love and that you think matter. And that was my entry point. How can I use ChatGPT to just be more productive so that I have more time to actually do my coaching, do my professional learning? And then once I went there, I realized how it could open up different aspects of coaching tools in all aspects of coaching. But I needed that little gateway. I needed that opening. And it came from my son in a slightly heated conversation at the kitchen table.
As my son and I's conversations are at the kitchen table sometimes as well. I love that. So thinking of it not as a AI replacement to you as a coach, but really just another enhancement, a tool in our toolkit, right? We're constantly looking for these tools. And I love this idea of like, you found a focus, like, can I use it to help me be more productive and efficient? So I have more time to do the things that I want to do within my role. And then also maybe a little bit of things that I want to do outside of that role, right? As being a mom and a wife and a friend, and just have more time. So
yeah, that's it exactly.
So then, okay, you've got 4 ways you're going to be sharing with us today of how ChatGPT might help. So where do we want to start? What's your first one?
Well, I think we should start with the one that actually hooked me, which is how can ChatGPT help us boost our productivity?
Okay.
Especially as a coach. And so I just took a really open, curious mindset of what if ChatGPT could do this? What if they could do this? Kind of the things I wanted to get off of my plate or the things that I wanted to do a little bit more quickly. And so I started with just asking it to help me write emails, right? Like those basic emails that are welcoming teachers back from break or reminding teachers of what the schedule is going to be. It helped me write templates for my emails that I then saved in my Gmail so that now when I find myself saying the same thing over and over and over and over again, I just pull them up with a template. But I was shocked at how conversational and friendly and on target that the email was that they gave me. Now, I didn't use it exactly, but it did save me a lot of time and giving me a base to then personalize. So emails, which we write a lot of, that was a helpful tool for just helping get some of it out so that I could do the rest.
Love that. I do not like writing emails. I feel like they're so formal for me as an individual. So, I mean, they're a necessary part of our role, but I mean, I much rather would just like open up Voxer and send you a voice message than having to send an email and make sure I corrected it and it sounds, friendly, but also make sure that you understand what the next step is. And so I love that you use that to kind of be that base and you thought of those different scenarios. This is a great way, I just want to point out, to maybe set yourself up for next year, coaches, right? We're in this testing window. And if you've got some time where you're not as active with teachers and in your instructional coaching roles within the classroom, what if we sat down and you sat down and said, hey, ChatGPT, write me a welcome back email, write me a let's get started, like just to have those templates set up and waiting for you to then maybe review next year when you really kind of understand what your vibe is going to be for next year.
Yeah. And it's shocking how much time going to your Gmail and just clicking those 3 buttons and choosing a template,
Mhm,
that saves a lot of time as
mhm,
a coach, as a
mhm,
human,
mhm.
with all the emailing that we do.
I love that. I love that.
Uh,
You also told me about creating surveys too, right?
yes. Now, Corey, I was shocked at this one
Okay.
because I couldn't possibly think, that it could come up with as
Mhm,
good of survey questions that I would use to
mhm,
ask teachers what they wanted out of a coaching cycle. So I experimented and I asked it to give me a list of survey questions I could ask teachers about their preferences for professional learning.
mhm,
And it gave me 7 that were exactly what I would have asked. The time
mm.
of day, the modality, the topics they wanted to learn about, the best way that they learn. Again, it saved the initial base time. And then I went in and tweaked them and copied them in and put them into a Google form. But I was really pleasantly surprised at how on target they were based on what I knew I would have asked.
Right. Well, and I love that it gave you, different things. Like I know sometimes, especially as a newer coach, if I would send a survey or I'd share some information in a newsletter, and then I'm going, oh, like it's already out there. And I'm like, oh, I forgot to ask them a basic, like, when would you like to meet? Or what time of day is best for you? Or like just those little pieces. So this idea of having it generate a list of questions that you might use, and then kind of recognizing the different focuses of those questions, I think is also really good, like that.
Yeah, and related to that, I've also asked it, to create agendas or to create a to-do list based on a particular topic or time of the year. And it has brought things up that, oh yeah, I probably should include that, or I didn't
Mm,
include that. And so just not being afraid to just put a command in there and see what comes out.
right.
You don't have to use it. You don't have to copy and paste it. You can modify it or you can leave it be. But it really is surprising at some of the things you might get that can save you some time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's like another pair of eyes, set of ears, another voice just to kind of bounce ideas off of. I think that's
Yeah.
great, especially if you are one of the few instructional leaders, or you don't have a very collaborative environment. Like you're kind of using ChatGPT as your co-creator for some of
Yeah.
these things, which I think sounds like a really useful tool.
So that is so funny you mentioned that. I was on a Twitter chat last night I was co-moderating with Kathy Parrott,
Yeah,
the
EduCoach.
Twitter
Yeah.
chat. And she was saying, when you work at home alone, ChatGPT can kind of be your brainstorming partner. And we were
Mm-hmm.
joking about, naming it and having it feel like a person when you're, stuck in a work from home situation and you need some human contact. So yeah, you
Oh,
never know.
yeah, yeah. It reminds me of those. I think it was a Big Bang Theory where one of them had like created a computer and it had a name and it responded to them. And
Yes.
I mean, that's the world we're in, right? The
Yeah.
Jetsons.
Yeah.
But it
Well,
can be
Siri
really
does that.
valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what else? What else? Is there anything else in that productivity realm that you haven't touched on yet?
I think there are 2 more things, but they kind of start to blur the lines in the other
Mhm,
aspects as well. But I am a big fan of lists, of
mhm,
to-do lists and book lists and idea lists. And I have found that putting in a command to help you generate a list
mhm,
is a really great time saver. I have asked it for lists of pertinent education blogs, for
mhm,
lists of books published in the last 10 years on classroom management, right? So
mhm.
it's kind of like um, a sourcing tool. Like we might Google the same thing and then have to
Right.
sift through all of the websites to find the things. ChatGPT is doing the sifting and is just giving us the things. So it just saves time when you're
Mhm,
doing that resource collection, which we'll talk about more, but it's really great at creating lists of things. And I've also found it's really good at summarizing things.
mhm,
I have pulled up an article and I've linked to it in the command box and said, summarize this article and pasted the internet link. And it will give me a paragraph summary of that article. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to read it and I'm going to pretend I did and send it to my teachers, but
mhm.
it does save some of that work so that I can say, hey, I found this article, you might like it. Here's a quick summary. So that teachers get that quick summary. I give them the summary. I may not have written it completely, but I know if it's on target with what I'm sending. And again, it just saves time so that maybe that article can spark a coaching cycle, which you'll now have more time for because you were doing all that generating yourself.
And I love that. That's one of my biggest tips for coaches is not to just curate all of these amazing resources, but figure out where and how you share those resources. It comes with a little context, at the very least, like, if I'm sharing a model video or an article, like why is this article maybe of value to the reader? And even some like reflective questions. If you read the article, think about these things. And then that could, again, spark a little self-reflection and self-coaching or an actual coaching cycle with me. But I think our teachers are so, and us as coaches, we're so inundated with, there's tons of research around us. There are tons of articles and resources shared. We are resource rich for sure. But part of the issue is, where do I find the time to meaningfully sift through those and decide? And so one of my faults as a first year instructional leader was just sending like all of these lists of these different, like, if you're interested in this, here's all of them, but no context, and no one clicked on it because how do they know where to start and why they should click on something? So I think we have to think a little bit more like a marketeer in thinking about what is the clickbait for that. You can't just share the article or the resource. You've got to give them a reason why and a call to action within that. And so it sounds like that summarization tool can not only help you with the list, but then a quick summary that you can share. And that is a huge time saver.
Yeah. And it was accurate. So I experimented and I actually took one of my own blog posts and my own articles that I had written. And I was shocked at how on target it was for what I would have wanted to see in the summary and in the list. It was there.
I love that. Okay. So you also have, so we've talked about the resources. You mentioned, some different professional resources, some research. I think you and I had also talked a little bit about like lesson ideas and, station ideas. So, I think you can just really think about different what resources would you need something for? What type of lists would you need something for? And then seeing what ChatGPT can kind of curate for you. And then you can kind of decide there where you want to spend your time and your focus.
Yeah, especially as a literacy coach, I am constantly trying to help teachers find meaningful activities for the kids to do in the classroom. That's not just busy work, but that also doesn't take a lot of time for teachers to plan and prep for, so students can get right to the work themselves. And so I've asked ChatGPT to generate a list of literacy station ideas to help students explore long and short A. Right? I get really specific. I've also said what are the top sites to help me find readers theaters scripts for second grade? Or what are 10 comprehension questions I could ask a student after reading any book? And then I can turn that into a station as well. So again, it takes what Google does, which is pull the websites in front of us, but then takes it one step further and just sifts out some of that content that prevents the content to us. And then I can pick and choose which ones I want to share, which ones I actually want to go visit and invest the time in. I've had great success searching for those literacy stations, as well as lesson ideas. How do I teach students mood? What are the easiest ways to help students understand theme? Or, how can students make text-to-text connections in a fun way? They all generate a little bit different response from ChatGPT. And again, it's just a starting point so that I can then get to the good stuff faster and then do that evaluating and the vetting. I don't forget that process. Right? I don't just let ChatGPT choose the stations and the lesson ideas for me, but I let him. I just said him. I let her present the ideas to me, and then I'm freed up to do that more important vetting work, as you mentioned.
I love that. So, and as you said, like that kind of blurs the line in a few of the four ways that you mentioned, right? Like it's curating those resources for you, which then ultimately enhances that classroom coaching that we're doing.
Yes.
So as we wrap up, I want to talk about the fourth one that we've got on the takeaways, which again, folks, you can download to see more information about these in our notes and takeaways from today's episode, which is designing professional learning. Not every instructional coach or instructional leader is also responsible for designing and facilitating professional learning, at least not always like big sessions that are kind of these bigger events, but we are doing professional learning in some way, or we're responsible for helping decide what our teachers need. So how do you use ChatGPT for that? What have you kind of discovered with professional learning and designing that?
Well, I've kind of relied on my love of lists for this as well. And I've asked ChatGPT to generate ideas to make professional learning better or more engaging. So for example, I've asked it to pull up icebreakers for adults in May, right? So it'll give me seasonal icebreakers. Or I've said, what are interesting ways to get adults to work in small groups, right? So then I'm just trying to generate ideas that maybe I haven't thought of, or I just haven't done in a while. So again, kind of does the legwork, and then I can decide what's best based on the group of teachers I know are coming to me and the content. It's really great at pulling those ideas together. I already mentioned it's great at helping you create agendas. Right. Now, obviously, it is not completely on target. If I want to do a professional learning session on, let's say, the science of reading, which is a very big topic right now, right? It's going to give me an outline based on what the internet is talking about on the field. It's not going to be what I know my particular teachers need in this particular moment with the resources that we have, but it does remind me of, like you're saying, those big things that are things that we could talk about, or things that we don't want to forget, or things I hadn't even thought of that are out there on the internet that I could bring in to the conversation. So I found, at least in the agenda creation, it gets me to think more about the kind of agenda I want to create and why for that particular group, which pushes me to think a little bit differently as a coach too. Something I never thought I would say that AI, right, would do for me.
Right.
It has.
I love that. I love that. This whole time I've been kind of thinking, especially as you use that language of like it sifts through of gem mining, just probably because on our spring break last month, my kids at Salt Fork State Park did some gem mining, and like they had the time of their lives. And I spent way too much money on bags of sand and fossils and gems. But I mean, sometimes there's great joy in the sifting through, but I think the thing that my kids are most excited about is when all of the debris washed away and they could see all of those gemstones and fossils there, then being able to pick through that pan and decide like, oh, I'm keeping this one. I'm giving this one to my friend. Grace found this huge crystal. I'll have to share a picture for the audience, but I think part of there is some fun and enjoyment in the sifting, but there's so much more meaning in being able to then take what was sifted through. So Google is the location. We know we're going to find some gold nuggets in there. AI can then help us sift through that, and then we can decide what we're doing with all of those gemstones and those fossils moving forward. So just feeling the analogy today.
Yeah, I love that analogy. There's one more thing I would love to share that I have found really helpful, is that it can summarize notes from a professional learning session. So sometimes I just take my own notes in a Google Doc for my own personal reasons, but sometimes we do group notes and everyone kind of goes into the document and shares their big takeaways. And I've had pretty accurate success with linking that particular Google Doc to ChatGPT and asking for a quick summary. Sometimes it comes out as a paragraph summary. Sometimes it gives me bullets. I'm not sure if I'm phrasing it a certain way. I'm trying to learn the ins and outs of how you tell it what to do. but that has been very helpful. And I will send those out after a professional learning session and say, here's a summarization of the notes. What do you think? Or I'll just tuck it away for my own purposes.
I love that. Well, I can even think, as we go to sessions, I mean, we're coming into summer conference season, using GPT to summarize your notes so that it's easy then for you to put into a newsletter or share out in an email with teachers to say, hey, I attended these sessions. If you're interested in learning more on any of these topics I learned about, like, here's quick summaries of them. And we can always schedule a coffee chat to talk more about what I learned. So I think it can also, again, part of what we do as instructional leaders is we're constantly trying to kind of remind those that we support that we're there and we have things we can do to support them. We're building that credibility, we're marketing our services. And it sounds like ChatGPT can just make that so much easier with the lists and the resources and the notes, the summaries that it can provide. So
it's another tool in the toolbox.
I love it. I am no longer rolling my eyes. I'm super excited. I've got a list of things I think I might ask ChatGPT to just kind of help me with, things that I might be like in a rut with, haven't thought much about, haven't had any new ideas about. Maybe ChatGPT does. So I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. It's always great to have you on the Coach Replay Show. I know we'll have you on for season 5, which, speaking of which, we are shaking things up. So tune in next week, y'all, for just a recap of season 4 with Kim and I and what to expect for season 5. But download the notes and takeaways, follow Stephanie from that notes and takeaways, and tune in next week for another episode of the Coach Replay Show. Thanks, guys.